Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode. Today we're getting back into rod building. I've got a snowy, wintry March day here in Wisconsin. We've already had 4 or 5 inches of really wet snow. It's supposed to snow for a couple more hours, and it's got me in a bummer mood because I've been down south for a couple of events already. I've had some really nice weather. I come home and I'm out shoveling in the morning. So it's been kind of a pain in the butt. But after having a couple of events, I do want to build a couple of rods. And today, the one that we're going to build is the FP-937. This is a flipping rod that measures 7 foot 9 inches. It's a 7 power. So this is a strong rod that we're going to be building. I think it can hold up to like 2.5 ounce rods. Let's see if I can find the, or 2.5 ounce weights. Yep, this one goes up to 2.5 ounce weights. So you're talking about a pretty stiff rod. You know, generally speaking, for me, I use the FP936, the FP937. Those are my two punching rods. You know, if I want to go a little bit lighter, I'm just flipping wood. A lot of times then I'm just going to use like the FP885. But in this case, I need to build a FP937 because I loaned one out at the Okeechobee event to another competitor, and they liked it so much, they told me they were not giving it back, which I thought was kind of crazy. But the reality is, I'm happy to have one of my rods out there being put to use. But it means I got to build another one. So we're going to build an FP937. I've actually got here my dimensions for an FP936, but because the 937 and the 936 are the same length, my guide spacing is going to be the same. So I'm going off of that to build it. And, you know, I've got cheat sheets like that for pretty much every rod build I make, so that after I'm done building it, or if I want to build a new rod in the future, I know what components I need to build in this case. I also thought this was cool. I hit a local, not a local bait shop, but a bait shop on the way home from Clarks Hill Lake, and I found this on the shelves. This is a Rapala Click and Wrap. You know, it's one of their, well, it's a discontinued bait at this point, but it was a lipless crankbait. They go for a pretty good penny on the secondary market. Not huge money, but probably double what I paid for it. So I was kind of surprised to see it on the shelves because it's been discontinued for a while. So it just goes to show you, if you keep your eyes open, you can find some crazy stuff sometimes in some bait shops. So I thought that was kind of cool. I love hitting up tackle shops and kind of just seeing what they got. But let's get down to the FP937 build. It's an MHX blank. So with respect to all of this, guys, you can get all of the components that I'll be using. I put the model number up in the video as well as in the video description so that you can go to mudhole.com and purchase them. The blank is a MHX blank, which you also get through mudhole.com. And this is one of my absolute go-tos. Anytime we're talking about flipping, you know, punching, whether it's hyacinths or a milfoil back home here, it's a heavy style rod to pull out the big bass from some of that thick cover. So let's get down to this build. The first thing that we're going to do is use our CRB spine finder to find the spine of the rod blank. By building off of the spine, I feel like we've maximized the rod's potential. And once we've identified where the spine is at, then we can start marking out where the guides and the reel handle and all of our measurements are going to be on the rod. In this case, we're using about a 10.5-inch handle length. That I measure from the bottom of the reel seat to the bottom of the rod. And I've, in this instance, got a similar rod. It's an FP936, so I'm going to use the same number of guides. It's the same rod length. And from that standpoint, I can use the same spacing. So I'm just using the other rod to help me mark up where the guides need to go. But I've still got the tape measure on my desk just in case I need to make sure that some of the measurements are correct. Now we need to remount both the handle grip as well as the butt grip to get them to fit snug on the FP937 blank. This is going to be something that's a really simple step using your CRB reamer kit, but it is a mess, so do it over a garbage can. I also highly recommend for those newbies out there to only ream a little bit at a time so that you do not over ream out either of the grips. Now we can go ahead and start gluing all of our parts into place using our 2-part Pro-Paste rod building adhesive. This is the fast set model. I really like to use that so that if I want to go ahead and start putting the guides on, I can do that in only really a few minutes of letting this dry. But one thing I will point out is I like to prepare some alcohol wipes just to help me with any sort of cleanup or mess that I might get from the glue. anytime you're putting parts on, you're going to have extra glue that starts coming out in certain areas, and it's just easier if I've got those prepared and ready to go to help clean up the rod. Now that we've got everything glued into place, we can go ahead, come back in a few minutes and start putting the guides on. All right, so we have got a dried up rod. All the glue, everything is done. I've started threading this rod. I've got it here in my CRB hand wrapper, and I'm just working on it now. I've got the first half of the rod done in terms of my thread work around the grips, both the butt grip and the handle grip, and then above the winding check of my reel seat. I like to do that. Some people don't like to do it, but I like to do it because when I epoxy over that, I feel like it locks everything in place, prevents water from potentially getting under the reel seat. It just seems to be a lot cleaner to me. Not 100% necessity, but I do think it makes a difference. One other thing to point out here is on a flipping stick, most people would not say to put a hook keeper like this. This is a drop shot hook keeper. The reason I use a drop shot hook keeper is the same reason you'd use it on a drop shot rod. And for a drop shotter, what they do is they hook the drop shot weight around that. Because I use a flipping stick a lot of the times in practice as well as in the tournament, but in practice specifically, I don't have hooks on. Generally speaking, if I'm flipping, I'm using a hitchhiker and a weight, so there's no hook to hook through a traditional hook keeper. So what I do is I slide the line under this drop shot hook keeper, and that holds the weight and the bait in place even without having a hook. So for me, that's a must on a flipping stick like this FP-937. I've got the label done. I'm just starting to put the guides on right now. I do want to talk a little bit about this rod blank specifically and why I like it so much for a flipping stick. Now, this is the MHX FP937. So it's a 7-foot 9-inch. This is definitely a heavier action rod, but the key here is it's got a very good parabolic bend. It's not a super fast tip. So it's rated for up to 2.5-ounce weights. But when you watch it in action, when you're fishing a fish or fighting a fish, you'll see a lot of that bend takes place in the middle part of the rod, not the rod tip. A traditional fast action rod that say you're using for a swim jig, a lot of the tip or the fight is in the tip of the rod. With a flipping stick, you actually want a good parabolic bend, a little bit slower of an action, because when you set the hook, there's a couple things that are going on there. You're generally going to be using heavier braided line. You've got big weights that you're pitching. And at the same time, you're not usually that far from the fish, 20, 30 feet away. And when you've got a big long rod, you can pick up a lot of that line fast. You've got zero stretch and braid. You've got a big weight that wants to blow through that fish's mouth. So when you set the hook, you actually want to set the hook a little bit slower. The faster and harder you do it, the more you tend to rip that bait right out of the fish's mouth. And by using a rod like this FP937 that's got a little bit of a slower speed, meaning it eats up more of the fight in the midsection of the rod, what that does is it allows you to get better hook penetration. So I've got here a bunch of fish catches I'm going to play for you while I get back to threading this rod. But it's really important, in my opinion, for you to look at the rod. Watch how the rod loads up when I'm fighting the fish. In fact, when you watch me catch that 7-pounder at Okeechobee this year, I actually probably should have lost the fish at one point when I was fighting it. I was a cluster. I lost the net fell over. And when that happened, I took the pressure pretty much off that fish. And you'll see the rod at one point almost go straight. And with most rods, what I believe would have happened there is I would have lost that fish. And the reason for that is I took all pressure off that fish. But this rod is absorbing so much of that fight in the midsection that there was a lot of bend left in that rod to keep a little bit of pressure on that hook to allow me to recognize that I just took pressure off and put pressure back on. So I truly believe that this rod is the reason why I was able to catch that fish. I also want to point out that a lot of times I flip the FP936, so a 1-power action rod lighter. In Okeechobee this year, it was really difficult to use that rod. I preferred the 937 because there was so much material that had blown up to form these floating mats that I had to use a very heavy weight. I was throwing a 2-ounce and a 2.5-ounce weight to be able to punch through some of those hard grass lines that had you know, cattails blown in on them. They had all kinds of pencil reeds blown in on them. They were full of gator grass. It was very difficult to get a bait through that stuff that was lighter than an ounce and a half. So when I went with the heavier weight, I went up to this FP-937, a little bit stiffer rod, and I was able to manage those big weights very, very easily. So this is a rod that I've been using now for several years. I feel like it is very much one of the mainstays in the MHX line. I think I've been using it now since I ever started with MHX, probably back in, I'm gonna say, like 2017-ish. And this was one of the first rods that I used because I love to flip heavy, heavy cover, whether it's milfoil up here in the North Country or it's flipping hyacinth and pennywort and thick stuff down in Florida. The point is, I need a rod that can handle that big weight and allow me to feel like I'm flipping a half-ounce weight all day. These rods are extremely balanced, very, very sensitive. I can't speak highly of them enough. So check them out, guys. If you're looking for a good flipping rod, I think you can see in the video how well they perform on the fish that I'm fighting. That I think you'd be very, very satisfied with this. So thanks for watching. I'm going to get back to finishing this rod off and putting it back in my arsenal because, like I said, I got to replace the one that I won't say was stolen from me, but was lended out, and I don't know if I'm going to get it back. So I need another one as a spare just to make sure in case something else happens or I end up lending out the other one that I have. But we're good to go. So I got to get this done. I'm going to get back to it before I got to get upstairs for some dinner time. So I want to finish this off. Anyways, guys, thanks for watching. All of the components you can find at mudhole.com. Put those in the video description as well as the measurements that I use so that you guys can use the exact same FP937 that I build and put it in your arsenal so that you can catch big ones like you just saw me catch in the videos. Thanks for watching, guys. Stay tuned. New tips and tricks video coming out tomorrow.